So today we have verses um, 7, 8, 9, and 10 of chapter 15, the Purushottam Yoga lined up. I'll start with verse number 7. ममेवांशो जीवलोके जीवभूतः सनातनः मनः षष्ठानि इन्द्रियाणि प्रकृतिस्थानि कर्षति. So the verse translates to a portion of my eternal self, having become a being in the living world, abiding in Prakriti matter, draws itself to the senses with mind for the sixth. This is what the verse translates to. Let's take this up word by word. Mam ev anshah. So that's the first word. Mam is my, ev only. So mam ev actually becomes myself. Ansh is a fragment or a portion. Jeev lok. So Jeev is a being and lok is the world. So Jeev loke becomes in the living world. Jeev bhuta is having become a being, so taking birth or being born. Sanatan, eternal. Manha shashthani. So manha is man is a mind. Shasht is sixth. So manha shashthani becomes mind as sixth. And this is in context to the next word, which is indriyani. So indriyani, the senses are five. Then prakriti sthani. So prakriti is nature. Sthit is seated or abiding, dwelling. So prakriti sthani becomes dwelling in matter or abiding in matter. Karshati is attracts or uh, is pulled towards. Okay? So the translation becomes a portion of my eternal self, having become a being in the living world, abiding in Prakriti, draws itself to the senses, which are five, with mind for the sixth. So let's chant it together. Mamevansho jivaloke
जीवभूत
jivabhuta
सनातन
manashashthani
षष्ठानीन्द्राणि
prakriti sthani.
प्रतिष्ठानि कर्षति.
So, as I had mentioned last time, the first set of six verses actually talk about the macrocosmic expression of that Brahman, of the goal that we are all trying to reach of God. Now, this set of next set of verses are actually talking about the microscopic or the microcosmic expression of Brahman as the Jivatma, when it takes a form, when it is born as a being. So, when that all pervading Brahman acquires a body, an individuality, or an ego, that is what we are talking about or going to talk about from this verse onwards. Now, what this verse is saying that this individuality or this individual or this being is nothing but a portion of that eternal Brahman. And this being identifies with matter or Prakriti, or even that Brahman is now in this being identifying with matter or Prakriti. In short, Jivatma is not different from Paramatma. This verse says that the Jivatma is an ansh, that is the word that is being used, ansh, of the eternal Paramatma, or the embodied is a portion of the eternal Brahman. Now, this is actually in contradiction to what was what we read in the Akshar Brahm Yoga chapter. Okay, where we read that Brahman is Akshar, which means it cannot be divided further. It is infinite. It has no parts, no subdivisions, right? But this verse is saying that it is an Ansh in the Jivatma. Now, this we need to understand so that there is no confusion in our minds about this. I'll bring this out with this example that when you talk of your room, or when I say my room, so what am I saying? That the space in my room comparatively is different from the space outside my room. Okay, so I treat the space of my room as my individualistic space. Space is the same. It's the same space which is pervading my room, the rest of the house, the environment outside. But when I talk of my room, I mean that that is my space. That is something different from the rest of the uh, space. But actually, space is not divisible. Now, when we look at the sun, there is only one sun. But if you put 10 mirrors in front of the sun at different locations, they will all reflect the sun. So it appears that there are 10 suns, but actually that is the play of the reflecting surface. The sun is only one. If we were to cover the reflecting surfaces or we were to remove them, the sun, there will be only one sun. The reflections would go, but the sun will remain. So, this is how, in this verse, that one God appears fragmented as embodied in this creation. That is what we are talking about. But the point to understand is that all the Jivatmas, each one of us, each one of the being, so even that earthworm that you see, forget about yourself, even that earthworm is part of that, is actually the Paramatman. So all attributes of the Paramatman actually apply to the Jivatma. The visibility of those attributes depends upon the vasanas and the form of the being. That's the only thing. But it's the same Paramatman, that same life-giving force that is running through the entire creation, even the tree that you see which does not move. Now, this concept we need to clearly understand because at it appears to contradict what we have been reading, that ansh, the word ansh, right? So we need to settle it in our minds and our intellect. I'll One was that example of the sun, which I'll repeat. The second example is of gold. See, the gold, all gold ornaments are pervaded by gold. Gold is the same, it's the same gold from which all ornaments, be it anklets, ring, necklaces, and so on, are made. So the all these ornaments actually have the quality of gold. I mean, if you were to take out gold, the gold is the same as a mass of gold, right? The limiting form of the ornament, whatever it is, anklet, ring, etc., seems to limit the attributes of the gold. But the limitation is illusory. Gold per se is not bound by the ornament. All ornaments are made of gold. So it's all pervasive in when we talk of gold jewelry. When the ornament is melted, gold remains as it is. There is no change in its value. Sun's example I've already given. It pervades the entire creation, but when it falls on a reflecting surface, the rays appear to acquire an individuality. And so so as long as we see the sun, we see that object, and when the sun sets, it appears to have gone. So it becomes dark and we don't see the object. So the reflected sun appears to have a beginning and an end, a birth and a death. But all these limitations of form, shape, birth and death, they're all illusionary because the all pervading factor, gold in one case and sun in the other, they remain unchanged. So, coming back to the verse, all attributes of Paramatma are there in the Jivatma. Paramatma is eternal. Therefore, Jivatma is also eternal. But what happens is that the Jivatma is deluded by the matter or by Maya. It starts identifying by the body, the senses, which were referred to as the kshetra in chapter 13. And consequently, when when this identification with the body becomes stronger and stronger, we all suffer the ills and pains that the body experiences. So instead of identifying with that Paramatman, with God, Jivatma, an individual, out of ignorance, out of delusion, imposes on itself all the limitations of the material layers. It identifies only with these. So, my body, so if the body is weak, we say, I'm sick. So, the individual or the Jivatma says, I'm sick. If the mind is sad, the Jivatma says that I'm sad. If the mind is happy, the Jivatma says, I'm happy. So the Jivatma, that is truly Paramatma. So it's all blissful and peaceful. Actually, because of its false identification with a form and a name, a personality is limited by time, space, and causation. This is ignorance. This is avidya or maya. So the Jivatma, in its ignorance, in its delusion, is drawn by or it struggles with its five senses plus the sixth, which is the mind. And please, here it is very important to refer to the chapter 13. At that point, also, you may recollect that I said this is a very important chapter to understand the distinction between or where our physical body ends and where we become start merging with the with God. So there specifically verse number 6 said, when we were talking about the kshetra, the great elements, ego, intellect, and also the unmanifest, the 10 senses, the mind, which is one, and the five object of senses, that means all those things on which the mind goes and rests. All this is the kshetra. Okay, this is the field. And another interesting verse which I would like to draw your attention to, which we have not read, but you can look it up. This is from the Kat Upanishad, section 2, subsection 1, verse number 1, which states that the Creator, Brahma, has made the senses such that they are turned outward into the world. And the Jivatma, so this is where the verse ends, but as the Jivatma, we start putting the senses into the world. So the senses are Prakriti, matter. The ignorant identifies with matter, and we start making claims of my body, my house, my spouse, my power, my wealth, and so on and so forth. This is how that uh, Brahman or that God is now becoming an individual. So, this is in the being, the individuality or the ego starts coming up. And actually, this is a gross misappropriation of things which do not really belong to us. Hence, the word Karshati is used in this verse. Okay. And for those of you who've done Isha Vasya Upanishad, just recollect verse number 1, which said that Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam Yat Kinch Jagatyam Jagat Teen Tyakateen Bhunjitaha Ma Gridha Kas Swid Dhanam. So that verse translates to that Ish ka vas hai, or that God resides in all that you see around you, moving or non-moving. So enjoy all this with detachment. Don't, tyag purvak, ten, tyakten. So that is the spirit in which you should enjoy all this. Bhunjita is enjoyment. Magrida, don't have greed towards it. Kastis vidhana, whose wealth is it anyway? Which means it's not yours, it's God's. Now, factually, the soul is immortal. It is the identification with the material body that makes the soul suffer birth and death. And once the Jivatma gives up this false identification and remembers the original state, it is that of Brahman itself. So the verse again is actually reiterating the Lord's assertion about the divine nature of man. So let's move on to verse number 8. I will chant. Shariram yadvapnoti यच्चाप्युत्क्रामतीश्वरः गृहीत्वेतानि संयाति वायुर्गन्धनिवाशयातः. So the verse translates to when the Lord takes a body and also when he leaves it, he takes these and goes with them as the wind takes the sense from their seats. So now two things are implied, and I will read the translation again. Goes with them. Them here refers to what we discussed in the previous verse, the five senses and the one mind, and the wind takes the senses from their seats. Seats are the flowers from in which the scent resides. Okay, so let's take this up. It's a beautiful verse. So let's take this up word by word. Shariram is body. Yat when Noti is obtains. Yat when cha and api also. Utkramati is leaves. Ishwar, that Lord. Gretva, having taken or having resided. Sorry, Gretva is having taken. Etani, these. Sayati goes. Vayu is wind. Gandhan is the sense. Ave as Ashyat, from where we are seated. So when the Lord obtains a body and also when he leaves it, he takes these and goes as the wind takes the sense from the seats. So let's chant it together. शरीरं यद्वाप्नोति यच्चाप्युत्क्रामतीश्वरः गृहीत्वेतानि संयाति वायुर्गन्धानि वाशया. So now to understand this verse, we go back to what we discussed some time back. What is our composition? What do we consist of? So we've been reading that we consist of the gross body, which is the physical body, the subtle body, which is the emotions and thoughts, right? Then the causal body, which is our seed personality, which consists primarily of vasanas, and that is the cause for our next birth. So therefore, we refer to it as a causal body. And then all this, behind all these layers is that Om, the pure consciousness. Now let's take up what happens at birth. So, the ovum is fertilized by the sperm. So the fertilization takes place. Then we have this n number of cell divisions. I'm sure we've read all of this in our class 10 or class 8 biology. Then the embryo is formed after those sets of cell divisions and so on and so forth. And then it stays in the mother's womb for 9 months. This is the gross aspect. This is the physical aspect. This is the what is at the level of the matter. And that also the grossest matter, the body. What is the cause of birth? Anyone would like to venture here? What is the cause of birth? Okay, fine. The fertilization takes place and so on, so forth. That's happening at the physical level. But what is the cause of our birth?
Desires.
Unfulfilled desires, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, both are right. So desires, vasanas, unfulfilled desires, these are the cause for the next birth. And why a new birth? I mean, we are already living. So why do we need another birth? Because any takers on this one? Why do we need a new birth? Why not fulfill all our desires in this birth?
Because we need a body, I think so.
Yeah, so we already have a body.
Yeah, but like you are otherwise eternal, but you need a body to fulfill your desires, or your prabdha जो भी आपका कर्म रह गया है या बचा है, I don't know. That is why that can only happen through the body.
It's
Yes,
I
because
and
don't
to
know.
merge with God, to become one with God, we need a certain purity. And for that, we have to leave our desires. We have to mentally, emotionally, with our soul, want to be one with God. If we
correct.
want more and more of this world, more of desires, we don't
Yes,
actually want God. And so we will not become one with the, Paramatma, with Brahma.
correct. So we have to sublimate our desires. That's what all of you are saying, right? Right? That's all of you are saying. That we have
Yes.
to get over beyond our desires. Now, what is happening in this body of mine? As I age, my senses are becoming worn and torn. I need more of maintenance thing. So I'm not so, my taste buds are giving way, my sight is giving way. I have to use spectacles to read what I could read without spectacles earlier. So my body is becoming worn out. So the new birth is required, that so that I can get over, or it provides me a conducive environment to exhaust whatever vasanas remain. So if I'm very fond of taste or very fond of sights, but I cannot see, I need a body where I can see and get over that vasana, right? So when we talk of exhaustion, it's by doing away with it, not by suppressing it. It's by exhausting it, it's by experiencing it and then removing it from a system. So the new cycle or a new body is required, so that we have a better environment to exhaust our vasanas. And at this point, again, we go back. I'm revising a lot of old chapters of the Bhagavad Gita and also bringing in references from Upanishads, so that we understand that some of it we've read and what we can possibly read to clear any doubts that we have. Now, chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, which actually, the Sankhya Yoga, which contained the entire philosophy, the verse number 13 is what I'll quote here. Just as the embodied passes through childhood, youth, and old age in this body, so does it pass into another body. And of course, Krishna goes on to say, there the wise one grieves not. Verse 22 of the same chapter, which is again a very, very famous verse, which we read umpteen number of times and we keep quoting it, as if we wrote it. Just as a man casting off worn out garments puts on new ones, so the embodied casting of worn out bodies enters new ones. So these two verses are very much in context right here, and they take us right to the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. Also, we read this. We read both the verses, we understood, we analyzed and contemplated, etc., etc. But we did not actually assimilate it. It did not become clear to us that we are not the body at all. We continuously keep identifying ourselves at the physical level. We read it, but we do not absorb it and assimilate it, make it a part of our personality. Because if this identification, if we had understood these two verses, then the identification with the body would have been given up for once and for all. Okay, so that is one. So this again brings out that how we read but not really read. Okay, and at death, what happens? So when we die, or when you see another person, a dead body lying, what happens? The body is left here, with which our identification is so strong. The body is left there, nothing goes. Does the person take away the relations, the wealth, the house, the property, the power? Nothing goes. We only take the five senses and that one mind that we are talking about, that we talked about in the previous verse, in the form of vasanas. That is all that goes with us. And of course, all the knowledge that we have gained at the spiritual knowledge that we have gained goes with us. So, in short, I mean, coming back to this, what we are saying is that the Jivatma is nothing but the conditioned consciousness which arises from that pure consciousness. And when it acquires, that pure consciousness acquires a body, it implies that the Paramatma is now covered by the Vasanas and has become conditioned and limited by the mind and intellect. And then it becomes embodied as a Jivatma. So the delusion is caused by the vasanas, which manifests again as desires, thoughts, and so on, that chronology of action. And we act to fulfill these desires. Now, of course, we've been reading that all our experiences are in the world are experienced through our gross and subtle bodies, and the nature of birth is determined by our karmas. What, how, by our actions, both in thought. Actually, thought is supposed to be the seed of action. So essentially, we should think what we are thinking of. We should observe ourselves. So the type of actions of the current birth determine our next birth. This is the theory of reincarnation based on the law of cause and effect. So one's future life is in our hands. Upanishads tell us this, Bhagwad Gita repeats this again and again. And two sections again, I will revise here so that, on whatever we are reading, somewhere it stays with us. So you may recollect the Dhyan Yoga chapter where Krishna reassured Arjun that those who follow the spiritual path or the path of self evolution do not lose anything, neither in this life nor in the next. So, there it was implied that the spiritual efforts are never lost. This is the only knowledge we carry forward, and they have a cumulative effect from birth to birth. So, for your reference, verses 40, 41, 42, and 43 of chapter 6, the Dhyan Yoga. Then, not so far back as the last chapter, which was the Triya Gun Vibhag Yoga, the same rebirth or the theory of reincarnation of taking of the new body was explained with the reference to the gunas. I would like to draw your attention to the verses 14, 15, and 18. So, these verses, what did they say? They said that when we meet death with sattvic vasanas predominant, we are sent to spotless worlds. When rajas is predominant at the time of death, one is reborn in an environment charged with action. And with tamas predominant, one is born into lower states of living, of illiterates and drunks, and even we can go down the evolutionary ladder and not be a human being. So, what is the implication of this? Was actually verse 14 and 15. So, with sattvic vasanas, we go up the evolutionary spiral. So, we are born into a higher state, better home, better facilities. With the Rajasic Vasanas, we were action oriented. We continue to be born into a family, which is, or into an environment which is action oriented. So what happens? It's that vicious cycle. We keep adding desires, we sublimate desires, but we keep adding desires, so we keep acting. So we remain where we are. With greater tamas, we go down the evolutionary ladder. So all these two parts that I have discussed, they talk about next birth. This verse is telling us that how the birth or the rebirth takes place. So, first and foremost, we must understand that goodness cannot lead us to sorrow and grief. That is the eternal law, the law of cause and effect, the law of karma. At times, we see people who do mean deeds and they appear to be doing better than us, maybe. But we have not seen the entire continuum on the timeline. We don't know what we had done in the previous births, and we don't know what the person is going to face maybe tomorrow. So let's not get swayed by that. We must have faith in this eternal law, the law of karma. And now coming back to this Atman, to that Brahman, being referred as a medium of transport of the soul from one body to the next. So that God carries us, and the how we are carried, or the to what kind of a body we are carried, depends upon our karma, which we have just revised some part of the Bhagavad Gita. So this happens at the time of death of the first body and birth of the next body. And interestingly, the Atman is compared to the wind that carries the scent from the flowers. So see, the wind is not scented actually. It is carrying the scent. Similarly, Brahman does not have attributes or vasanas, it is carrying the vasanas and taking them to the next body. So let's move on to verse number 9. श्रोत्रं चक्षुस्पर्शनं च रसनं घ्राणमेव च अधिष्ठाय मनश्चायं विषयानुपसेवते. So the verse translates to presiding over the ear, the eye, the touch, the taste, and the smell, as also the mind, this being enjoys the sense objects. So let's take this up word by word. Simple. Shrotam is ear, chakshu is eye, sparsh is our organ of touch, cha is and, rasnam is the organ of taste, granam is the organ of smell, ev also cha and, adhishthaya, ruling over or presiding over, manaha, the mind, cha and, I am this being, that Paramatman which is embodied, Vishayan, object of the senses, Upsevate, enjoys. So, presiding over the ear, the eye, the touch, the taste, and the smell, as also the mind, this being enjoys the sense objects. Let's chant it together. श्रोतं चक्षुस्पर्शनं च रसनं घ्राणमेव च
Adhishtaya
मनस्वाय
Manashvaya
विषयानुपसेवते.
Devate.
So again, this has been, Paramatma is the enjoyer. That is what is the import of this. By being the perceiver in the sense organs, feeler in the mind, and thinker in the intellect, and of course, the actor in the organs of action. So, how is this? How is Paramatma the enjoyer, the perceiver, the feeler, and the thinker, and the actor? Any takes on this one? Because it is the enlivening force. Paramatman enlivens both her gross and the subtle body. If we are not enlivened, then what are we? Dead. That dead body example that we were just taking. The body is there, but nothing functions. Can we act then? Can we emote? Can we think without God's enablement? No. So all our sense of perceptions or sense organs, for example, are enabled by God. In fact, all our organs of action are enabled by God. So, Paramatman, by virtue of being the enlivening factor, is the ultimate experiencer, experiencing through our body, mind, and intellect, or enlivening them. This was happening in our old body, this is happening in our current body, and this is what will happen in our next body that if we take. When we take a new body, since we're talking of birth here, our senses are well spread out in that new body, are arranged, and we are talking about, ear, eye, etc., etc. And through those, we gradually start experiencing the new world. And the experiences that we undertake or we experience are in accordance with our vasanas or tendencies. And this we have read that if you have the inclination for music, that is where you'll head. If you want go into a beauty pageant, that is where you'll go. If you're a sports person, that is where you'll go, right? But the point is that it is the Lord who is the enjoyer. And Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita specifically has been calling himself, where he refers to himself as a pure consciousness, minus the attributes, minus the conditioning that you see, as Bhokta. The Rajavidya Rajguhya Yoga, chapter 9, said, verse number 24 read, I am indeed the enjoyer. And of course, he goes on to say, and also the Lord of all sacrifices, where it means all actions, right? So sacrifices there refer to action. Then the our favorite Kshetragya Vibhag Yoga chapter 13, verse number 23 read, the Supreme Purusha in this body is also called the witness, the permitter, the supporter, the enjoyer. Right? So repeatedly he's saying that all the enjoyment are actually being enjoyed by Paramatman. So the catch is that we as individuals get caught up in the world and its experiences and we forget our higher connection. In our previous birth, we identified with one body. In my current birth, I'm identifying with another body, and the new birth will identify with another body. Continuously, we remain in the realm of individuality, identification with a body, mind, intellect, and ego, and the birth. All this actually leads to the progression of the ego. But all this is kshetra, as we read in chapter 13. All this is matter. It is because of ignorance and delusion we constantly pursue the relationship with matter only, forgetting God, the enabler. And this happens because we cannot see God. We cannot perceive God through any of the senses, which are all going out into the world. And the other thing is that Brahman or God remains neutral. It does not affect our discrimination or choice. So it's like the fuel in the vehicle. So a new person who enters a car is very much enamored that, okay, this is, the speedometer and this is the gear and this is the steering wheel. So this is what makes the vehicle move, or this is how you reverse. So all that is at the matter level. The point is, if there was no fuel in the vehicle would not move, right? So Brahman remains like that, neutral. You do whatever you want to do, but it is the enabler. It's the fuel in the car. And of course, in that chapter 13, the knower of the field or the kshetragya, what is the pure consciousness that is conditioned by desires and vasanas? Or the purush is conditioned by prakriti, and the individual appears as an individual. So this brings us to the end of the data or information that was given to us. Okay. Now we come to verse number 10, which talks about assimilation of this information. I will chant. उत्क्रामन्तं स्थितं वापि भुञ्जानं वा गुणान्वितं विमूढानानुपश्यन्ति पश्यन्ति ज्ञानचक्षुषः. So the verse translates to the being, departing, dwelling, or enjoying, united with the gunas, the deluded do not perceive, those with the eye of wisdom see. Let's take this up word by word. Utkramantah is when we leave or departing. Sthitam, when we are seated or dwell. Va or api also. Bhunjanam is enjoying. Va or gunanvitam. So united to the gunas. the gunas. So when we are united with the gunas, vimudha. Mood is stupid or deluded. Vimood is extremely deluded, completely deluded. Na not, anupashyati, perceive, pashyanti, see. Jnana chakshusha is with the eye of wisdom. So the verse translates to this being, the embodied, that Purusha in the body. So this being departing, dwelling or enjoying, united with the gunas, the deluder or the deluded do not perceive, those with the eye of wisdom see. So we'll discuss this, but let's chant it together. उत्क्रामन्तं स्थितं वापि भुञ्जानं वा गुणान्वितं विमूढानानुपश्यन्ति पश्यन्ति ज्ञानचक्षुषा. So now the thing is that there are umpteen instances when we are looking, but we are not seeing. When we are reading, but we are not understanding. How many of us can actually appreciate a great work of poetry, a great piece of art, or music? Yet we all can see, read, and hear. So this is at a different level, but the same logic applies to the entire mankind or the humankind. We are so dazzled by the world and what it has to offer to us that we just keep going behind. It's like a child you take to a toy a store, a huge one of those Hamleys or whatever. The child will just go behind those, running after those toys. That's exactly the way we are when we move out into the world. We completely miss the connection of the entire creation with the Paramatman. We read our scriptures, we do our studies, but forget all that information that has been provided to us, all the data that I just mentioned that we read in the previous three verses. We forget how it applies to us, how it is a part of us, whether it is the old body or the new body. We forget that we are experiencing whatever we are experiencing because we are enabled by God. We continue our attachment with the gunas, the material layers, and each one of us loses ourselves in our vasanas, be it for sports, music, business, whatever, art, profession, home, whatever it is. We don't even get a hint of the higher. Normally, it's only once in a while that you sit down and you admire a sunset, and then you think of God, or you see the lightning and you say, oh my God, what power, what force. But that's very, very, fleeting, and the occurrences are very remote that we actually see that there is a power or experience that there's a power higher than us. Now, in our ego, we continuously miss this constant factor which is there in the entire creation. So we are vimood, as the verse is saying. So mood is deluded. Vimood means completely deluded, supremely stupid. And why? Because we do not see the presence of God from birth to death in all our activities. The fact that I can speak, the fact that you can hear, that is God. That is, we are provided this faculty by God. In all our experiences, we miss God completely. And then, even at death, where we talked about the previous verse, where God helps us to move from one body to the next so that we continue to sublimate our vasanas. So, what are we saying? That when we are coming into a body, departing from a body, staying in the body, and experiencing the body, God is with us throughout, but we remain attached to the stupid ones amongst us, remain attached to the gunas. God is there even with us when we are not conscious. God is always there. As long as we are breathing, we have a body and living, God is there. Therefore, it is only the really stupid ones amongst us who will ask or who will say, I don't believe in God. Where is God? Show me some evidence. These are stupid questions. To deny God is to deny yourself. That is the bottom line. It is only the wise who understand the presence of God in and through all that they experience, all that they do 24 by 7. And the verse says, they are the ones who see and not see as in sight through the eyes of wisdom. The word used is jnana chakshisha. So that is what is used. And with that, I would like to end today's session with a share from, it is actually written by Akbar Allahabadi. It is part of the Hangama Hai Kyun Barpa. You might have heard the rendition of by Ghulam Ali in a lot of forums, but the verse is amazing. So or the share is amazing, if I may say. I will say it for you and then I'll present English translation. हर जर्रा चमकता है अनवार इलाही से, हर जर्रा चमकता है अनवार इलाही से, हर सांस ये कहती है हम हैं तो खुदा भी है. Or the English translation, which I'll do piecemeal so that you can appreciate the share better. Har zarra chamakta hai. That means every little particle sparkles. Anware illahi se, with the radiance of God. Har saans ye कहती hai. So that is my breath. Every breath is an affirmation. हम हैं तो खुदा भी है. If I exist, God does too. So with that, we will conclude today's session.